Iowa coach Kirk Ferentz and assistant John Budmeyer will be suspended one game for a violation related to the recruitment of transfer quarterback Cade McNamara, according to multiple reports. Ferentz is the nation's longest tenured FBS coach, having led Iowa since the 1999 season. Budmeyer serves as the team's wide receivers coach after working as a special assistant to Ferentz in 2023, as also an assistant analyst on the offense in 2022. According to media reports, the suspensions are related to an NCAA investigation. Iowa is set to open the season August 31st at home against Illinois State. Ferentz is scheduled to speak with reporters Thursday afternoon to wrap up preseason training camp. The Athletic first reported the suspensions for Ferentz and Budmeyer. So Kirk Ferentz scheduled to meet with the media Thursday afternoon, so just here in about 12 hours. And obviously, he's going to have to address this unless they cancel that session. But I can't imagine that that's necessarily going to happen. We shall see if he, in fact, does meet still with the media and takes on these questions, because this will have been official by then, you would think. McNamara committed to Iowa on December 1st of 2022, just 3 days after entering the portal as a graduate transfer. Take that for what you will. We've seen that elsewhere, but it is fairly uncommon that somebody enters the portal and they are committed within 3 days. So what that speaks to is possible, I'm conjecturing here, possible tampering, because they're not supposed to have communication with that particular athlete until they actually enter the transfer portal. McNamara started for Michigan in 2021 as the team won the Big Ten and reached the college football playoff, but sustained a season-ending leg injury in his third game of the 22 season. McNamara had battled injuries throughout his time at Iowa, but opened the 2023 season as the team's starter. Although Ferentz announced in July that McNamara was the team's starter, McNamara and Northwestern transfer Brendan Sullivan has been competing for the job in camp. Budmeyer, a former Wisconsin quarterback, was offensive coordinator at Colorado State in 2021 before joining the Iowa staff. So Budmeyer suspended, Ferentz suspended. You got to think that since it involves, of course, Cade McNamara's recruitment, that, of course, Budmeyer would be the main contact of Cade McNamara during said recruitment. And again, the 3-day gap between the entering of the transfer portal and the signing to Iowa is rather suspicious. So this happened, let's see, in December of 2022. So we're looking at more than a year and a half. So you wonder what type of information was relayed to the NCAA concerning this situation, because here we are a year and 10 months later, and we now finally hear about this. So typically the NCAA works on these cases and investigates these cases because of what? Because there is a particular entity who has squealed on another entity, not because they find this stuff out because of their reviews of situations. All right, we got a call coming in from Nate. Nate, welcome to the Voice of College Football.
How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I got you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your call.
Fantastic. Apologies for not being on camera. It's just a little late. So,
that's fine.
So I wanted to call in because this is an unusual situation. I got a couple of buddies. I'm here in Des Moines, Iowa. I got a couple of buddies who work out in Iowa City writing for various papers. And so I usually get information about these kind of things a little bit ahead of time. I just called him about a half an hour ago. There was no indication this was coming. And the strange part about it is this is clearly leaked intentionally. I mean, that's just how anything gets out.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily in a bad way or anything like that, right? Like they're just trying to get the news out ahead of time, say a press conference is coming. But it's kind of hard for me to believe, just my intuitive understanding, that he randomly self-reported this kind of allegation a year and a half later after this happened. So that's all I wanted to say is this is an unusual situation. I thought it's not really going to affect the Hawkeyes because I could coach them against Illinois State and they're probably going to win, but it's unusual to say the least.
Yeah. So the last statement I made before I took your call was basically the history of the NCAA is following up on leads given to them by rival schools. So would you think that that would be the impetus of this investigation?
It could be. I mean, if you've ever listened to any news outlet in your space, the only thing they say is the NCAA is incompetent, right? Which means maybe a year and a half later is when they follow up. But typically I have heard about these kind of things ahead of time. So and this sort of just came out of the blue. So that's what struck me. I think, especially when you're just close to home and you got people in the organization, I really had no idea about this, and so I was struck. I wanted to hear what you had to say about it because I feel like I'm in the dark too.
Well, I'm in the dark too. So I just simply read the article, and the only two pieces of information that we have there are basically it's Ferentz and Budmeyer. It involves McNamara's recruitment, and obviously just recanting the timeline of the suspicion of the just 3 days between McNamara hitting the portal and then signing with Iowa. And even at the time, we talked about that being just a bit suspicious.
Yeah, and they self-reported for Caden Proctor, if you remember as well. So I mean, they've done this in the past, but that was also fairly swift. Remember when they reported for
Yep.
Caden Proctor? We found out immediately, but we're also expected to simultaneously believe what did they, did an intern have it on his desk, and suddenly he forgot the piece of paper. Oh, they found it a year later. I don't know. It's just strange to me.
Yeah, it doesn't. Strange is a great word because I think it speaks to more, yes, lack of administrative tasks being checked off than it does something unsavory. It's much more, at least based on what we see here and what we know of the program, to again be a bookkeeping, administrative, clerical issue with somebody miscommunicating and not going through all the proper channels and procedures, rather than again them being unsavory in some type of recruiting effort to get Cade McNamara.
Certainly, and this obviously is a minor infraction.
Yeah.
We already know the details about it. I mean, this could be the famous Jim Harbaugh buying someone a cheeseburger. I don't know, but it's just strange to me, and it's almost like we've got a couple of days left before the first games happen, so let's just do the news now. Like this is ESPN's got a couple of days left. They got to get something out in the papers. So I don't know. I'm not sure it really means anything, but I'll be interested to hear what they actually did to get a 1-game suspension, because that is not a serious suspension at all.
Yeah. Us doing this live stream in reporting this news, I don't want to miscommunicate that I believe that it's anything serious. It was just simply that I thought, okay, this is news. We've got an Iowa channel. The best way to get this out in the most immediate way is just to do a live stream, read the story as we have it. We don't have a lot of details past that, and just to get it out there. So the urgency was more so than the immediacy being because it was or appears to be severe. So I don't want anyone to misread that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. Totally agree. It's more funny that it's Kirk Ferentz, the most by the book guy I've ever met in my
Yeah.
life. So, like that guy getting suspended is almost sort of just comical, I would say.
Yeah, and the rules concerning, well, of course, the NIL more so than the transfer portal, but also the transfer portal being loosened as much as they have, it's becoming more and more difficult to even break these rules because they're so non-restrictive this
Yeah.
day and age.
Yeah, and that's what when you said strange is a good word for this. That's why I was confused because one text to Caden Proctor was an immediate problem. But suddenly, a year and a half later, like I said, did an intern bury this document? It doesn't really make any sense why he would be getting a game suspension or he had an epiphany. Oh, I shouldn't have sent that text, or I shouldn't have bought that cheeseburger or whatever. Because if it was a serious suspension, 4 to 6 games, something Harbaugh-ish, where you got some guy sitting on the sidelines, that's a serious deal. But a 1 game for Illinois State, it's just, I don't know, it's just very strange to me.
Yeah. So they obviously, this is in a situation in which we found out, and this has been pretty airtight, which also leads us to believe that this all came to be very quickly.
Yeah, agreed.
It's not like we found out, okay, the NCAA is investigating Iowa concerning recruiting violations, and then we got to wait for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and then finally we get the details. We got the details. We didn't get the details. We got the result. We got the penalty and the discipline, and so we got it all in one fell swoop. That doesn't typically happen.
No, it like it says. I mean, I'm reading your screen right now. Recruitment of transfer quarterback Cade McNamara. So somebody told ESPN, hey, this is what's happening and this is why, which means they know what it is.
Yeah, and it's already been reviewed, investigated, reviewed, and determined what the penalty should be.
Yeah.
Before anyone knew about it.
That's exactly right. I don't know how they did such a good job. I mean, seriously, it's like a bravo, clap your hands kind of moment, because that is really tight-lipped. If they've been investigating that, again, it could be a really minor you slap on the wrist kind of thing, and we never think about it again. We probably forget about it, but it's just strange to me, because I remember a couple of times with Iowa before where the moment something happens, it's just immediate news. It's not a year and a half, tight-lipped investigation. And so if it had been, one of their Brendan Sullivan, someone they just brought in this year, I'd say, okay, that makes a lot of sense. They just brought him in. But Cade McNamara? Like, what could possibly have arisen unless Cade, accidentally told something he shouldn't have told someone? Or it's just strange.
Yeah, I used the word tampering earlier. I shouldn't have necessarily gone there. I was speculating based on the 3-day window of time. Sure. I certainly don't want to jump to conclusions, but there is a connection that could be made there. It's not necessarily going to be the case, but I would think that. I don't know how they would treat tampering. I don't know that we've seen, even though we know of instances of tampering. We know that it's happened all over the place, but we know about specific ones that are pretty well, I don't want to say documented, but it's been pretty clearly defined in other situations that I can think of that there was tampering, but it wasn't necessarily dealt with by the NCAA. So I don't know how harshly they would deal with a tampering situation.
No, I'm not sure anybody knows the answer to that question. There are lawyers who don't know the answer to that question. So I don't think you or our speculation is particularly useful on that one, to be honest. But
yeah, just to throw out a situation or a scenario that there was tampering, but it was reviewed to be fairly innocent in a way that the window opened at midnight and there were some texting a couple hours prior to, or something like that.
11:59 would be perfect. Yeah.
So, yeah, Illinois State game number 1. So Iowa not playing one of these titanic week 1 matchups, as is typically the Iowa approach to scheduling. And it certainly pays off here.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, I won't get into that with you because you've already done a bunch of great shows on that. But yeah, that's kind of what's so funny about this is it's unusual in the fact that multiple other things that have happened to them, betting scandals, the racism scandal, Caden Proctor, they all broke immediately. It was not a year and a half later or something. I mean, as soon as somebody reported it, it was out. So that's why this Cade one to me strikes a little unusual. But also, I mean, I do mean this. I think you or I could coach this team to beat Illinois State with that defense. So, not sure this is a meaningful suspension, but I do appreciate your time. I don't want to take up all your time, but thank you for taking my call here, Mark.
Thank you so much for the information, Nate, and the perspective. Thank you for the call.
Yep. Have a great one. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Nate Fennelly with a very informative call for us and a perspective from a news background. I would think, I'm going to take a shot here, that Phil Parker would be called upon to be the head coach. I would think. I might be wrong about that. Maybe they would want to keep Phil Parker focused on the defense, and maybe LeVar Woods could possibly be the head coach. So Phil Parker, LeVar Woods, if Tim Lester obviously has the most recent head coaching experience at a fairly high level with Western Michigan, so they certainly have some options there. You know, we saw this situation just a year ago with Michigan where they had three. There we go. Thank you so much for that. Llama Power Hawkeye. That's the name I was looking for. Seth Wallace is the linebackers coach, and I believe co-defensive coordinator. What's his exact? In addition to linebackers, I guess it's just assistant to the head coach. Thank you. That's actually the name that was in the back of my mind as I was weeding through LeVar Woods. I was thinking, yes, they do have somebody that is in place to be assistant head coach. Very good there. Thank you for picking me up on that one. Yeah, so they've got their bases covered from that perspective. Tim Lester, I think that's a tremendous hire. We've covered that exclusive in a number of ways for a long time here during the off season. And Phil Parker, just leave him alone to do what he does best. There you go. Seth Wallace, assistant head coach. Bingo. All right. Very good. Again, not necessarily anything here that we need to review. I think that it's pretty clear cut in regards to what we're dealing with in terms of what the issue is, in what category. It's a recruiting violation concerning Cade McNamara, concerning his entry into the transfer portal. And then we've got, bam, the conclusion of the verdict being the 1-game suspensions to Kirk Ferentz and John Budmeyer. It's just, what are the details concerning this recruitment, and what did they do that was in violation of the rules? College football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under the radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.